I
Okay,
gotta go
so
quickly.
Corey started us off last time. It seems only fair that I come back and do it this time. So again, the goal here is not just to diss Hutton, although he's very dissable, mostly because he brings it on. Those who fling poo shall eventually have poo flung at them. But to talk about other options in saber fencing so that when people go, hey, I'm interested in saber, what's out there? We've got resources that say, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. We're even going to come back and circle back to something British, just so people who are in the Isles don't feel like we're dissing on them for being isolated from the continent. Okay, I got away with that one. No lightning struck me. So, Jordy, you do Spanish saber, and you probably would phrase it differently. So what's up with that? Why is it cool? I'm going to put you on the main spotlight. And again, everybody else, do me a big favor. If you have a question, do a hand raise. If Jordy doesn't see it, I'm happy to interrupt and moderate, but we want to give him center stage.
Okay.
Fire.
Okay, what's cool about Spanish saber? Well, the main thing is it's based in an existing system that it was called verdadera destreza. I don't know if you know them. It's the Spanish system that started in 16th century with rapier, and the system itself, it's interesting because it's like a fencing science. It's based in mathematics, geometry, and they explain everything with that concepts. And apparently, for the historical resources, it was very powerful, at least in that time. Apparently, the Spanish sword fighters were famous all over the world. And that system was made to be able to be extrapolated to other weapons, and it's what happened with the saber in the 19th century, when Jaime Merelo y Casademun did a treatise of saber based in La Verdadera Destreza. And because if I'm not mistaken, at that time, he was a military, so he had to do like a manual to train the recruits for the military, and he did the manual. But instead, if I'm not mistaken, in that time, other countries like England, they were building their own new system with saber. I'm not sure if it's that true. It's what I heard. But what Jaime Merelo says in his manual in the prologue is like, well, why we have to do a new system if we already have a very good one? So he basically took as he says, the ancient style, and he adapted it for the Spanish saber, and it has a lot of common things taken from the old system, and he bring it back to with the Spanish saber, military saber. For example, in La Verdadera Destreza, it's one of the main things is it's more defensive than offensive. Actually, it's focused on defend yourself. That a good defense, it defends yourself and offends your opponent, but it's always defend yourself, kind of. So it has a lot of bindings. It has movements to the sides. Always there is a lot of pictures about doing circles and moving, doing angulations to always be safe. And most of those things are in the Spanish military saber. For example, the atajo, it's kind of the main trick in La Verdadera Destreza. It's a binding with subjugation, kind of. With this word, you use the gravity in your advance, and you bind and use the gravity to have more strength on your blade against the weakness. It has kind of that with the Spanish military saber. It's not done as the same way with the rapier, because the saber doesn't have quillons and it's lighter. But yeah, it has this trick that for what I know, this trick is not in other styles. Also, what we have interesting, yeah, the side movements. They always say is to do a side step, curvo in Spanish, with any strike you do. What else we have? The parries are done close to the face or to the body, very close. I think it's different in the other styles. I'm not sure 100%, but I think this is mainly the cool things, I guess. I don't know if you have any question. Yeah,
I do
basically,
already.
tell me.
So what's really interesting when someone says destreza to me, right? I think of rapier, obviously, with all the in the circles and stuff. And so I guess you're saying that this is actually a direct lineage from the rapier texts, then? Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes. Actually, you can consider that the manual that I'm reading from, well, the manual from Jaime Merelo, it's kind of the last treatise of verdadera destreza that was made. There are some later from his new field, I think, but it's literally a copy of this treatise. And actually, after that manual, the saber fencing changed. It's starting to be like a thing you do in a room with your other guys. It's not a military thing anymore, and they changed the terminology. They changed everything. They stopped using the verdadera destreza terminology, and they changed the whole system. So it's kind of the last manual that they talk about verdadera destreza.
I find that fascinating, simply because I don't know that we've studied a saber system yet, at least on this segment, where it traces its direct lineage back that far. And in this case, to a weapon that I would say is really different. And now I see we have like 3 additional questions. So
Isabel, why don't you go first?
You mentioned something about stepping to the side every attack. Is it for every attack or just a thing you can do?
It's not mandatory, but in the manual they recommend you to do that. Like one of the things we do I do also in La Verdadera Destreza with the rapier. It's what they taught me is like you always have to leave from the center line, always, to provoke a wound. So they kind of use that also with the saber. It's true that with saber, it's not that important. Maybe you have more things to do in the middle center. But yeah, in the manual, he recommends to do a side step, maybe after a parry or not from the beginning. But gaining grades in the circle, it's an advantage.
Okay.
So I was going to ask about steps, and in the process, you just expanded my question about grades and gaining them. So I have thought several times, we have such a profoundly mixed cultural history here in Texas. I should look at some of the Spanish saber, especially since you've got de Frias writing in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
One of the barriers to that is self-teaching La Destreza is a little bit tricky. And so I'm curious, when I read in de Frias, for example, they have the French, Italian, and Spanish steps delineated differently. How do those things work and connect into the main tradition?
You mean like the distance on the steps?
And the types of steps.
Oh, well, in the tradition, we have like the cardinal points, like forward, backward, to the sides. Also diagonals, but well, not well. We have the traverse, but we have one in the middle. It's kind of when you walk in a circle made that's the central line is the diameter of that circle between you and your opponent. And if you walk in that circle, you are kind of in between of going to the side or going with a traverse. It's like in the middle. So in the treatise from Jaime Merelo, it has all that stuff. So you have the same directions that the old treatises from Rapier, and yeah, it's like that. It's the same steps. I never I heard something about the Frias, but I think he used the same steps actually. I'm not sure. I didn't read the treatise from Frias.
He did something I wasn't expecting, and he described what a fencer would normally call a standard marching step. For example, here's my advance. He calls that the French step.
Okay.
And he calls this the Spanish step.
Oh yeah.
He calls this the Italian step.
Oh yeah, I heard that before. I never see that described like that in the all treatises in the verdadera destreza. We use more like the first step you did is like recto, like the what you said is the Spanish. Well, they use the Spanish and the Italian kind of the same when you use the back forward, the back feet forward your front feet. It's called just paso. It doesn't have a name. Probably this is the Frias was in Mexico. Maybe he was also military, right? So maybe because of that, in the military world, maybe yeah, these names are different because of that.
Makes sense. Thank you. Marcus?
I want to circle back again to saber systems that are based upon rapier systems or in general. So someone maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've read that German Kreuzler Roux tradition is also based on the Fabris tradition from Italy, which is pretty interesting, but I am not really an expert on that, so don't quote me. I would have to do a little bit more research into that. But I thought it's an interesting bit of information to mention at this point.
Yeah, we have several instances where there are lineages that do have long historical tales. François, go ahead.
One of the things I've noticed, Jordy, when I fence with you on the weekends is when I'm always seeking this the engagement in TS, right? But when I fence you, what I find often is that you're kind of poking and prodding, going off to the sides. And I really see you trying to use that destreza circle that I would normally see you use in Rapier. And I'm curious to see, how do you have to change it between a saber and a rapier? Because obviously you're not dealing with quite the same weapon.
It's well, actually,
or if you don't have to change it, you know.
Well, an interesting thing about the destreza is that when developed the system, they wanted to do it like a science of fencing, like it can be used for any weapon, and they use it rapier because it was the weapon that they have at that moment. But the system, it's in at least with footwork and moving to the side, it's very extrapolable to any weapon actually. And yeah, you see me always going to the sides. It's because I going to the sides, it gives me more targets and makes me safer from your weapon. So that's why I always move to the sides. And maybe with saber I do it too much because I'm very used to rapier, but yeah, I still use it a lot. I don't know if that was your question.
No, that works.
Okay.
Because for me, as coming from French background, that's very confusing to all of a sudden like, oh, I can go off to the sides, but then all of a sudden be like, oh, he's going this way. Oh, he's there. Oh shoot, now I have to turn. And then my parry has to be much wider than I would like it to be. That's a very that's very disarming when you're not used to it. And
Yeah.
I think when we when you first got back with us, that's one of the things that very much happened to me. I was like, oh shoot, all of a sudden you're all off to the side. And so that was a very interesting thing for me to experience, that all of a sudden I can't be safe in the assumption that we're going to stay mostly linear.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very useful actually.
Corey? You're in mute.
Every time, every time. One day I'll learn. So I'm going to keep hammering this offline stuff because I think it's really cool. Because I think I fence very linearly. I think very linearly. How do you train people to start moving offline? Because when I start trying to move offline, I usually end up getting stabbed because I'm probably doing things in the wrong order, or I simply don't think about it when I'm fencing. So how do you adapt that mindset and train yourself to be thinking of moving off that center line?
We used to train like exchanges. We at the we didn't put the side movements from the beginning there. So when we started training the saber, we did the usual exchanges in the straight line, and when we were being used to the good hits, good parries, then we started adding the steps to the sides. First, after a parry, so you do the parry and then you do the step and the hit. One thing that the Spanish saber, I don't know if other styles have it. I'm sure it have it also. But we do the parries very close to the body, to the head, for example, like this. So the arm is already charged for the riposte. So
And that was actually my next question. Was that is utterly alien to me, because from the Radiolian perspective and from being verbally taught Goggler, right? I was always told it needs to be an extended guard. Like if I'm in fifth, I don't want to be here. I want to be up here, because if I collapse, I want to collapse to here as opposed to I collapse to here.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of performing a very close parry is really alien to me. But at the same time, I am charged from this position, like you said. So do you have any difficulties in structuring those parries? Do you have to make sure they're absolutely perfect to prevent that sort of collapse, or?
Yeah, we paid a lot of attention on them during the training, because when you are in a real fight, you tend to not be that close. So we really train it a lot with those parries, like very close, being very, very, very exquisite parries here. Because yeah, during a combat, you sometimes you don't do it that good. So we really paid attention to that.
Do they give oh, go ahead.
Also, well, what he says in the thread also, it's good. This parries is because if your opponent wants to switch a cut to a thrust, the point is out.
That was my next question, was, okay, why? What's the reason? And yeah, that makes sense.
I had experienced that. The point is out, and now all of a sudden, like, oh shoot, I have to go back.
Yeah.
Which I guess, yeah, makes sense for you fencing contrepoids where it's very thrust heavy. That is very interesting. Okay.
It has a weakness because doing the parry here, your arm is very exposed. But yeah, you have to be very sure about the attack that is coming.
Very cool. Isabel, you want to go again?
Well, as this comes from Rapier, is there a lot of more thrusting than compared to other systems? Well, not French counterpart, but because Sabre is usually very cutty and not thrusty.
Yeah. In this one, I could say that it's kind of maybe 50-50. But a lot of tricks for I use thrust as a bait a lot of times, like a thrust from the outside. Well, in the manual they describe to use the thrust as a commitment to provoke a defense for your opponent, and then you end with a cut. But yeah, I use thrusts as a bait, yes, like to provoke, for example, a thrust from the outside to provoke a parry in that side, and then I can change to a cut in the other side. It's kind of 50-50.
Just to kind of build on that real quick, I think it's always really fascinating when you have masters that say similar things. Luigi Barbasetti says one of those same things about thrusts, that they're a very great form of attack, not just because they're fast, but because they tend to bring a reaction from your opponent.
Yeah.
There's very few people that do not want this point out of their face
Yeah.
immediately.
Exactly.
So what you said, that really resonates with me, because I love using them that way as well.
I find it funny that you connect it to another master, because I couldn't connect it to myself too. In a way, how I was talking about counterpoint is you thrust to go into a cut and you cut to go into a thrust. Often one can set up the other very often. That seems like something that's crops up very often in that sort of saber fencing that includes a lot of thrusts.
Yeah.
Even with the Hungarian to an extent, if you consider that back edge cuts hit very much like a thrust and serve a lot of the same purposes geometrically.
Feldman says that thrusts are really good as feints to provoke a reaction and then go for cut.
Yeah, in the manual is described like a perfect commitment that has to be done pointing to the right eye of your opponent, and to provoke really a reaction like, oh my god, that's what you say. Your opponent gonna be comfortable to have a point in the face.
I really appreciate that level of detail, though, because sometimes you see all of these different, please excuse the dogs that are currently wreaking havoc in the background, but you see all these manuals that sometimes are light on detail, and then you get down to, no, you need to put your point directly at their right eye. That's fascinating to me. Is that a level of detail that you see pretty consistently in Destreza?
Yeah. This you can. This is also described in the old treatises. The system itself with rapier, it was very detailed. Like you were able to describe a whole fight with steps and positions of sword. Like they make a whole system to describe everything. It's very interesting, actually. It's what I fall in love with, that style. The geometry, the mathematics, and the way they explain everything.
Okay, I've got a two-part question for you, Jordi.
Mhm.
First is, do I understand that when you are making a sideways step, you are generally stepping away from the blow rather than towards it?
In general, yes.
Okay.
But in general, yes. It's funny because with rapier, it's actually you are going in to the blade, for example, to do an atajo, a binding.
Mhm.
But with the saber, you kind of do the binding, but you move away. It's kind of different. I experienced it that if I do the opposite, if I go in, I end too close to my opponent. It's
Okay.
my experience. And
So
and the
you're
manual,
moving away from the blow.
yeah.
And then you're making an extremely tight parry. So am I wrong when you're describing those tight parries in space as you're putting your parry where their blow would have been had it succeeded and then uncurling?
Yeah.
So the poor bastard thinks he's won all the way down to the point where you smack him in the mask?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
That's rude and wonderful.
That concords with my experience.
So you would verify that, François? Have you
Absolutely.
made cuts at him and absolutely thought you'd succeeded until you got smacked in the mask?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That happened multiple times.
Which I guess also makes sense. If you're stepping, do I have to, if I've moved, do I have to parry as far as opposed to if I've not moved?
Right.
Yeah.
That, okay. Now I'm beginning to think I'm beginning to grasp a little bit of this.
One of the things.
Also, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Building off of that, parries. If you I've seen Jordy though. He's done it to I think once or twice to me where he's tried to step in with his parry, and at that point is he's been able to do this thing that in destreza they call it conclusion.
Yeah.
And disarm me. He's done that, and I think that's one of the few occasions in which that like really worked well. I don't know if that's your experience, Jordy, but from my end, it certainly seemed that way.
Yeah, conclusion in Sabre, it's very difficult. It works sometimes, but it's not a common thing. It's not like rapier. Well, just to give a bit more of information about la verdadera destreza is that so in the books they say that you know, Spain, 16th century, they were very religious. And so they made the destreza, saying that, well, your life is sacred, it's been given by God, so you have to protect it at all costs. So that's why they do a very defensive style. And actually, they also say, but the life of your opponent is also sacred. So if you can not kill him, better. So that's why it has a lot of focus on disarming. La verdadera destreza has a movement called conclusion that is basically disarming. But they put a lot of emphasis on that. So you can disarm your opponent and not kill him. Any questions more?
If no one has any, I have two more.
I start to feel like a broadsword slinging barbarian by comparison. Go. Corey.
I mean, the books they look intimidating with the circles and the geometric diagrams, but it is a fascinating sort of scientific approach. Is there a specific time period and master that you prefer for Destreza Sabre?
Destreza Sabre was very tight. It was just 19th century. It basically was Jaime Merelo and some more friends. Well, we had the Frias, it's true, we had Frias, but Frias was a heavy saber, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little bit different. There, I did a seminar of the Frias with a friend, and some of the tricks make sense for a heavy saber, but not for light. The saber used with the military saber, it's the Hutton. He describes the Hutton saber, and it's kind of light, not a heavy cavalry saber. So it's a little bit different.
And
But yeah, it was go.
for this system, right? I know you said it's a military saber system. Where is this being taught to officers? Is this being taught to cavalrymen? Who is this being taught to primarily?
To everybody.
Everyone. Okay.
Yeah. So apparently they want to teach the basic soldiers very well to keep them alive. Apparently, I was surprised when I saw that actually.
So basically, if you were
Spain.
issued a saber, this is what you were taught.
Yeah.
That's really cool. The only other question I have right now is if I wanted to pick this up and start reading through it, who would you recommend I pick up and start reading?
Yeah, Jaime Merelo, actually there is I was researching yesterday about it, and there is somebody translated the book to English, and I have a friend who has ordered it, I think. I'm not sure. It's printed in order. I can give you the link if you want.
If you would, please, because then I could include it in underneath the dialogue for the conversation. And then anybody
Sure.
who wants to check it out can see it. You can do that afterwards if you don't want to do that in the middle of the call.
Yeah, I have it here open. Don't
Okay.
just let me paste it here. So I didn't read the manual in English. I don't know if it's very good or not. But actually, I was during the pandemic. I was working with a friend called Phil Swift. I don't know if you know them. He's also in Canada. I think in Nova Scotia. I'm not sure.
Yep.
But he he contacted me during the pandemic because he was interested in Spanish Saber, and he did a group of study, and he was doing a few videos about it, and he was like coming back to me and asking me questions and if it works. So I think he was using this book actually. So I guess it can works. You can start with there. At least the Spanish version, it's very simple. I mean, it's made to train military, so it's not like the old treatises that they have a prologue of like 30 pages just talking about Heraclit and philosophers and how good I am and not you and things like that. Yeah, this treatise is very straightforward.
Building off of that, would it be a good idea if somebody wants to practice that saber to go read some rapier at the same time as well? Because for me, one of the things I keep saying to people who want to pick up French saber is read the foil sections in your book, because that's where like the meat and potatoes of your system is. You need to pick it up in foil before you can apply it to saber. So is destreza with a saber similar in that way?
No, no, you can go ahead with the saber. They don't mention anything about foil or rapier. No, you can go with it. In the manual, they don't mention anything about other weapon.
Isabel, I saw you demute. Did you have a question? Okay, I've got a question for you. It's cultural.
Mhm.
We know that some of the things that we thought back in the day when I was starting out as a HEMA dinosaur were wrong. And that in fact, lots and lots of people, regardless of social class, all across Spanish culture were fencing. And they were fencing with rapier, and sometimes they would do it before work and sometimes they would do it after work. But it turned out not to be something that was simply up in the ivory towers, but was absolutely widespread through society. Do we have any indication that saber fencing was also done on a hobby, keep yourself fit, do something with your community basis as well? Or is it too early to say things like that?
No, yes, it was actually what I was mentioned before, that with the saber they ended using la verdadera destreza with this, because after this treatise, the saber started to be more like a social thing. They do it in clubs, and yeah, they changed the whole system. I think the other treatises are Abelardo Sanz. I think it's more modern. It's changed. I did a little bit of it, and it changes completely. They don't tell anymore about destreza. I think they don't do side steps anymore, things like that. But yeah, it was it's after that, probably it was at the end of 19th century, it became a social thing.
Cool. François.
What sort of if building off also the what treatise should I look into if I want to start this? If I want to start this, what sort of saber should I be picking up? Because that may be something to look into. It may not getting the standard Eastern saber or one of the black fencer ones might not be the best recommendation, right?
Maybe some of you gonna kill me, but I started with the Hanwei Hutton.
Oh.
It was a light one. It was a little bit shitty, it's true, but it was very good to start with this. with this treatise. Maybe a little bit light, but it's he describes a Hutton saber, like is what he recommends.
I started with Boken with a leather handguard, so no one's going to kill you here. Marcus.
So from a let's say consumer perspective, is the manual hard to read, or can a beginner read this, or do you have to have a fencing background to understand the stuff?
No, the manual was very straight. It explains everything, and it doesn't. It's not like the old treatises that they took like a whole paragraph to explain a step or something. This is very straightforward, really. Actually, I haven't seen the translation, but I guess it's gonna be the same way. Well, in the treatise they explain everything, and it's not. They just explain the things. It's not long and it's easy to understand, I think.
Yushiba?
Great.
Do you need to be good at math to understand it? Because the
Oh.
rapier manuals seem to be like that.
No, it's not needed. It's true, they pay a lot of emphasis. It's true, you have the angulation and the lines, but actually, at the moment, I'm reading one of the treatises of Rapier from Ettenhard, and they actually start the treatise explaining you what is a point. What is a point? What is a line? And they just start with geometry. It's very funny, but no, you don't need. And in this manual, they explain it very well, and it's not that complicated. You are not going to see the circles. Maybe there is one picture, but no, it's easy. Don't worry.
So accidental demon summoning will remain with Rapier rather than Sabre. Got it. François.
When you're in say in a bind, essentially with the swords touching against each other, how much of that looks when say you're trying to get an advantage over the other person's blade to get control, as we would do in Rapier, how much of that transfers over? Does it look like Rapier if I'm picking up a saber?
It's not exactly the same. Actually, in general, we try in Saber, we try to not be in contact with blades because you are giving a lot of information. It's completely the opposite, like the rapier, that the rapier you really want to touch blades all the time. So I know what you are doing. And actually they in the Saber manual, they explain the atajo as a, they call it quite de atajo, like parry, atajo parry. So it's done in second intention. It's like a second intention trick. After a thrust or a kind of flat cut, you do the atajo. You parry and do the atajo. Moving away, and then you can hit. And the other day I think I did it. It's not easy to do. It's not like Rapier that you are always looking for the atajo. With Saber, it's more like a second intention. Like after a parry, maybe you find the way to do the atajo. The last day we were fencing, I did it to GP, I think. It was funny because he found himself like trapped. And actually the atajo, it's more like you put it horizontal, not like Rapier that just put it there. Because yeah, you don't have kilons. It's a little bit different, but it's the same concept.
Cool. Corey, and you're on mute.
I see him getting a reputation. So we have, and I think we've already kind of started doing this, but we have a pretty interesting opportunity here because we have two people on, one that's currently talking about a Sabre system, and François, right? You've already talked about one, and you both fence each other somewhat regularly, right? So I think it would be cool to kind of get commentaries on each other's systems from each other, since you guys are fencing each other. Can you guys offer any sort of anecdotes or perspectives?
Yeah, well, I remember that your style were a lot of thrusts. a lot of hanging guard thrust. Well, we call it fifth thrust. It was interesting. Sometimes they are a little bit tricky to parry, but yeah, it's why I remember more from your style. I will pay more attention next time to see.
For me, what I'm always seeing is I'm always seeing you like right there poking and prodding, and we're changing, and it's well, like that, and then eventually something comes, and then parry wide, go out, and then you do this, as you described earlier. And when you were describing it, was that's exactly what Jordy does. It's a very interesting system to fence against the Sabre, honestly. Because it's similar, but it's also very different in a lot of I feel the more fundamental was in terms of footwork and the sort of understanding of parrying. As you said, you're parrying very close, which is not what I think most Sabre systems would call for. So all of a sudden being like, this looks like it's going to hit. Oh no, it didn't. Oh shoot, now I have to go parry. And it's what I find happens a lot is I have to work not just in the second intention, but now in the third and maybe even fourth intention, if I can get that far. Because the way you parry makes me have to really commit to an attack. And then when it gets parried, because obviously you've become really good at that point, it's a lot of work for me to actually set myself up to get a proper touch in. And that's why I think a lot of the touches I managed to land against you are thrusts, whereas versus cuts, because you've become very good at stopping those cuts with those parries, and I'm not equipped to deal with that yet. Whereas, as you mentioned, the thrusts from my system are very tricky, so that's where I feel like I have better chances.
I'm gonna jump in because you just pinged something really big for me, François. Pardon my rudeness. So back in the dinosaur days, Stephen Hick and I used to joke that if we took the circularity of destreza footwork and the circularity of Hungarian blade work, we could create la verdadera sabia. And you just described him, at least in terms of on screen, fighting from a very similar medium guard that I use, and pretty much nobody else does. Is that something you see him doing on a regular basis, François?
What do you mean by medium guard?
Hey, here's my blade. It's hey diddle diddle straight down the middle. Now I know De Vria mentions it, but you're talking about here he is, here he is, here he is. There's that hand in the center line, as opposed to out here to close an outer line or up to close a high line.
There is that in that sense where he's like this sometimes. What I tend to notice is when I come to third, all right, now the hand turns a bit, but it still stays kind of centered, and that's at least that's what I notice. We're very much like this, and whereas from a counterpoint perspective, I want to have that right in front of me. I want to use my guard to cover myself, to hide behind it, which work. I can illustrate it better with this. Whereas I'm really trying to, stay hidden behind my guard between TX and Cat. He's like a bit more lower. It's working like that there. Or I think more medium, as you say. But there is often that thing where you're not either in TX or Cat. You're just like that. And especially when the blades aren't touching, when you're not when you don't have engagement. That's kind of one of the things I notice.
Yeah, we pay a lot of it in the treaties. They only say one stance. It's the medium guard, and you have to be very perfilated. So with just switching the width, you can do the third or the fourth parry easily. Yeah. Yeah, we stay on the mid guard. Yes.
I'm not alone. Marcus?
Going back again to the parrying system. When you parry this close, aren't you susceptible to feints? I mean, I can quickly redirect a cut, and wouldn't it just go somewhere else? Maybe when I see it in person, it would be easier to understand, but it sounds like you could just redirect your cut and I would land on the arm instead of your guard.
Yeah, actually, it's one of the things that I do with my colleagues in Barcelona. In my academy, where I've been training that, it's in Barcelona. And yeah, I used to feign a lot like a cut to the inner face. And when they are parrying this, I switch to a cut on the hand. You have to be very I think that we do is like try to be, you have to be a little bit cold-blooded and wait a little bit to do the parry, that you really have to see the parry coming to that direction and then do the parry. If you do the parry too fast, you're gonna end like this. It's the weakness of this type of parry, that you show your arm a lot. So you
I
have to
see.
be very, very sure that this parry is coming and it's not a feint.
Okay, two technical questions.
Mhm.
Does the destreza for the saber use the false edge? And how do you grip your saber? Because rapier, because of the quions, is very, very different than a saber as a weapon.
Mhm.
I would be shocked if you were gripping it the same way. I could be wrong, but I would be shocked.
No, we kind of use well, the first we use the counter cut, not very often, but it's usable. I actually have a colleague that use it a lot, like always trying to cut you from your hand with the counter edge. And the grip, we do the pistol grip. It's like the thumb at the back. I can grab my saber 1 second. So it's like these three fingers are the ones who really work with, and it's basically it's more or less like the rapier. We don't do hammer grip, actually. It's basically this. And
Cool,
you have-
thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Marcus, I just saw you unmute. Go ahead.
Maybe it's time for the elevator pitch, I guess. So, what makes this cooler than Hutton?
Well, for me, yeah, the side steps and the atajo trick, it's very funny when it's hard to do. But when you do it, it's very how to say it. I like it. Like, oh, you have your opponent on like fleeing.
Let me follow
Say-
up on that real quick, if you don't mind,
yeah.
because it's part of the elevator pitch. And I have to tell the short story, but I'll keep it very short. So I almost died because of toxic hepatitis. My liver was completely gone. And as part of my recovery, I had to reduce inflammation. I did a lot of internal martial arts to heal my body up. And one of the instructors I had, who was very high level, said, this is an engine you can connect to any suspension. Any martial arts style can be driven this way. If what you're telling me about la verdadera destreza is correct, would that also apply to what you're learning? You could pick up a halberd, you could pick up a staff, a saber, a knife, a rapier, a longsword, and fight according to similar principles with simply mild deviations and adjustments for the specifics of the weapon.
Yeah. There are more. There is also from Jaime Merelo, also did a treatise for bayonets.
Mm-hmm.
In my academy in Barcelona, we also do A33. And there is a lot of holes in that manual, and we fill the holes with the DNA of destreza, and it works. And I never fight with a longsword, but I was talking to my one friend of mine from there that yes, I think I can really more or less defend myself with a longsword using these principles. It's very, you can, I think actually knowing a little bit of verdadera destreza, it gives you a good base to learn other weapons. It gives you like a sense of defend yourself and control. And you can use even a chair, maybe.
I remember actually Andre, who's in our club in Montreal, who was telling me that back when he was in Spain, he used to train with the AEACC with Alesh, and he was telling me how their longsword they use destreza for it, which that was very unusual to me when I first heard it. But no, it's something that does happen even today. It's,
All right, on my screen, Jordy is frozen. Are you guys also frozen up, or can you hear each other?
We practice in all of them. We only have one master. It's in the longsword, and if you
Jordy, I need to
look at,
interrupt you for a second. I apologize.
Yes.
My connection was unstable, and so we lost the first half of that sentence. Could you repeat from the start, please? Otherwise, the people who are listening to this later will have no idea what you were trying to say.
okay, what we were talking about, yes, with destreza, you can really extrapolate it to any weapon. You have learning destreza will give you like a good base in defend yourself in whatever weapon. And in the in my academy in Barcelona, it's called Duobellum. If I can give you the link if you want to know. Yeah, you can really feel destreza in all of the weapons that we use, even longswords. I never practiced longsword, but I seen in my colleagues fighting in Barcelona and my colleagues from here fighting, and the style in longsword, it's even different. Like here, people, it's very powerful, and in Barcelona they used to bind a lot, and it's like it's destreza kind of. They do Lichtenauer, I think. Yeah. With destreza you can barely use any weapon. Yeah, Merelo had treaties for bayonet. There is people doing it with a knife actually. Yeah, it's a lot of weapons.
I'm guessing that also gives you a unique perspective on whatever treatises you're reading to have never really practiced longsword in that way, because that doesn't seem like to be a very standard approach in HEMA, just because everybody does longsword, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I never. Someday I will start with longsword. Actually, when I was interested on HEMA, I was thinking to start with longsword, but by my schedule, I was not able. And I started with rapier, and I just discovered all the geometry and things. I was like, I have a scientific background, so I was like, oh my God, this is fencing science. I love that. But yeah, it's different. I don't know.
It's okay. We encourage you not to start longsword.
Well, what I was telling also, the master that we have the guy who is considered master in our fencing academy by the Spanish Association of all fencing. It's he does longsword, and he uses a lot the binding, a lot.
I think it's exciting that the more we look at this, the less generic it actually is. The more you have actual systems popping up that aren't simply, here's a weapon, here's your tricks, that we tend to see a lot of surface play on, but that over time we could see real different system exponents and how they vary up, especially when our students and grand students start hopefully playing together. That would be very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, he's made his elevator pitch. Who else has anything before we thank him and move on?
I forgot something. Because I'm gonna ask everyone. Does your saber fencing have any grappling?
Any what? Sorry.
Grappling, like grabbing the hand or the arm.
Yeah, it's called the conclusion. It's a disarming. It's more or less done as the rapier. But it's not very often. It has to with rapier. It's kind of common to disarm your opponent, but with saber, it's not that good. You don't have kill.
I have no idea how rapier works, much less destreza. So
Yeah.
how does the disarming there work?
The disarming actually it comes from a binding. When you bind and your opponent made an extreme movement like a long thrust or something like that.
I can give you something on camera if you need to.
Oh yeah.
So say you have this blade here, right?
Yeah. So if, for example, after a huge thrust, you do a very extreme thrust. I see that coming, so I can go in with an atajo, so going close to you. And yeah, so with the atajo, you create 4 angles with the 2 weapons. You have to put your body in the lower. So at this point, your opponent's blade, it's
thing goes like that,
out.
right?
Yeah, you go in and you put your arm under the blades, grappling the.
I don't have 3 arms, so.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's okay.
You kind of go under here. And
under here, you grab the blade, the blade guard or the hand, and you do a mix of traverse and curvo. So you end it at the side of your opponent, being far from the left hand of your opponent, so he cannot punch you or do whatever. And you have the blade in control, and with your blade, you point to his belly. It's a very funny moment. I taught you in some classes.
Yeah, you did.
You end at his left side of the body, grappling the. With saber, sometimes you don't need to end to the side. Sometimes you just, when he does the extreme thrust, for example, you just do the atajo and grab the guard. It's kind of okay.
From my perspective, how it ends up looking like is, all right, I thrust. Oh no, my blade's been put aside. Oh, now there's a point pushing my blade down here. And now there's the arm that's coming to grab my hilt, and I'm being pulled this way.
Yeah.
As he passes to have his left foot forward, and he has a point here. And like, oh, okay. I think I either let go of the sword or get thrust.
Yeah. It's an interesting moment. It is very explained in Verdadera Destreza.
And he's very good at doing it. So
we train it a lot. Okay.
All right. If we have concluded the questions, thank you very much, Jordi. This is fascinating. If you come up with any other links for your school, for books you think we need to be aware of, anything like that, shoot me a message. I'll process this during the week so that it gets posted up. But you've got a little bit of time to think about what you might want to have going in the comments so people have resources. Very much appreciate your time.
A pleasure. Always that you have a question, just contact me. I will join the Discord. A pleasure.
Wonderful.
I'm up to help.
All right. And then we just have to figure out who our next victim is. And we will circulate and percolate on that and get back to everyone. Thank you very much, y'all.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
We've got more videos and content coming, so if you liked what you saw and it was useful for you, please stab the like button, /subscribe, and punch the little bell icon
so that you're notified immediately when new content comes available. Thanks, and go do the thing.